guests today are Kenyatta Rivers, and Rob Reedy. We join their conversation in the faculty lounge.
Which made it a little bit difficult because I knew these were very historic places, but not having much time because you got a presentation. You're in and out, and so everybody says you need to see this, you need to see that, and then all of a sudden you get there and you say, oh, all I saw was the convention hall. I saw this from the bus, or I saw this from the airplane, whatever else, but I didn't get a chance to see all these nice sites that you're saying. So if I had an opportunity, I probably would want to go back to some of the very places I've presented and actually see those cities without having, to do professional kinds of things. How about you?
Well, my dad was in the Air Force, so he was all over the place. But when I was born in Oakland, California. Mm. And right at that time, my dad got out of the Air Force, and he has too much Mississippi mud between his toes, and he had to move back to Mississippi.
Okay.
So of all the places I could have lived and grown up, I grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, and spent my formative years there, and really came to appreciate that state. I mean, it's been under fire historically, a lot growing up, but it was a good place to grow up. Grew up in kind of a rural city, that kind of thing. But the places that I in my travels and education, I've been around a lot of places, and of course I have to exhibit in a lot of national, international places. But the irony of that is I can ship my work and send it off. The galleries don't even need me there sometimes. So I've been everywhere from Madison, Wisconsin to Mississippi to the West Coast to Boston, So, but I like Florida. I've been here for this is my second time here. I was at Ringling School of Art and Design before
in Sarasota.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was at a conference there, and the I guess the part of Ringling that trains clowns and stuff was like nearby the hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So tell me about Mississippi, because I think that's interesting, because I have never visited Mississippi.
Oh, yeah.
And some of it may be related to what you have just said, the history behind it.
Right.
So what would, tell me about Mississippi that, that would give me
a different perspective.
A different perspective about Mississippi. Yeah, because you see movies,
Mississippi burning.
Mississippi. You're right.
Yeah.
The Ghost of Mississippi.
Well, one of the things, I was educated in Mississippi. I got my MFA there, and then I went away. I did my work on my master's at the University of Delaware, and I was an NEA fellow. So one of the things that was interesting, when I went to high school, we had not integrated schools yet. Where there was still a black high school and a white high school. However, what was strange in my particular situation is the black high school was absolutely incredible.
In what way?
Every way, academically, athletically. Matter of fact, the problem that we had in Tupelo is that the black students didn't want to come to the white school.
Okay.
So it was. I never experienced any of the upheaval, riots and stuff like that. Although it was happening all around Selma, Alabama, and then I went to the University of Mississippi, James Meredith, and and all that stuff. But a lot of people don't what realized in the Meredith situation is that a few people that were on TV gave that state a much blacker, darker, sinister image than it really had, and really has, I think. Ross Barnett standing up in front of the Lyceum saying, we're not going to let any of these people in our school. Meredith was already enrolled and in his dorm room. A lot of people don't realize that. So there was a lot of us there that hated that kind of hatred and that kind of perception that was being brought on our state. And what I found out is that kind of thing it permeates our nation. It's not just indigenous to the South. You know, it's just, I think what was true and good about that is that the civil rights movement was kind of sprung out of that, Little Rock and Selma, Alabama and stuff. So quite frankly, the odd part about this is that when I went to graduate school at Delaware, I found they hadn't even integrated their school systems there yet.
But you know what? That's interesting because in the minds of, I guess, a number of people, it would be, you know, and I know that other states had their challenges with some of the things that you just mentioned, but it would seem more acceptable, even in this day, for one to go to those other states than to still go to Mississippi. And I don't know why that is so.
I think it's because it started there. I think that was Philadelphia. I mean, you know, there were 3 young men that were murdered in Philadelphia, but yet how many people were murdered and injured in Boston during the integration riots there? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think it's partly press related. But the fact is that those things did happen. They were horrendous and they were true. And this was the epicenter. I mean, it's where it started, and it's where the movement began. You know, so in some ways that has a lot of negative connotation and baggage with, but quite frankly, in other ways, it gives us a sense of pride that we've changed a lot of those things and we've become centers for awareness.
But you don't hear much about, at least I don't seem to hear much about the changes that have been made. And it may have something to do with television. Maybe television still projects Mississippi as Mississippi was and not as it is now. But I think this is interesting because you asked the question earlier about where did I grow up and so on and so forth, and where would I want to live given the places I've been. And as I said, a lot of the places I've been, I've not lived there, but I would like to go back. And part of the reason for that is that I think I would do more traveling, and part of the traveling would include visiting older relatives, because a lot of my older relatives have, passed on now, and so I've been trying to reconstruct the history,
family tree, and the history,
not only the family tree, but I'm also wanting to know what were their lives like during that time. One cousin that I had the opportunity to meet right before he died, maybe about 3 or 4 years before he passed away, was one of the last 2 or 3 survivors of the Tuskegee syphilis study.
Right.
And how he described that experience and whatever else, I certainly would not ever want to go through something like that. But I need to hear that, because hearing that allows me to at times be more appreciative and grateful for the things that I do have. And I sometimes look at kids from all backgrounds, and I think that at times they don't fully appreciate the great things that they're enjoying now because they don't know what others went through in order for them to be able to enjoy those things.
Yeah, never forget it.
Yeah, and never forget. And that is one of my goals. I don't ever want to forget that.
Right.
Not forget it. It's not that I don't want to forget it because I want to harbor some ill will. I don't have that feeling. That's not my feeling whatsoever. But I don't ever want those individuals who went through that feel like somebody has forgotten them. So in times of not writing manuscripts and whatever else, I have traveled to visit different relatives and to try to get their perspectives on different topics, things that happened in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, have gone and videotaped my grandfather telling about the family tree, which is awesome because that's one side of my family that seems to know more about the history than the other side, and that's my mom's father's side. And we can go back to the very slave that came from Africa and to her grave site.
Right.
There's no other part of my family that I can do that with.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So in terms of Mississippi and history and all those kinds of things, I I want to know about.
Yeah. See, that's interesting. You should mention that. The storytelling was always a big part of growing up. It was a way my relatives had of passing on the family history and stuff like that. And I can remember as a child sitting on my grandparents' porch, you know, in late evenings, you know, and them talking about, you know, the history of our family and specific instances like the 1926 tornado that came through and tore up, you know, devastated my town that I grew up in and stuff like that. But well, you're right about all that. I mean, it's important. I think the thing that happened to me is that when I got out of the state of Mississippi is that I realized that racism is not indigenous to any one state. It's a virus that and a sickness that infects all cultures, and it goes way beyond African American and Caucasian cultures, you know, and it permeates all types of cultures, and so it was kind of an eye opener for me. When growing up, I felt guilty about, you know, coming out of the state, you know, because of a whole host of situations that have been documented and editorialized and stuff. And then I went to University of Delaware, and I didn't know the Mason-Dixon line was, you know, just crazy stuff like that. Was that far north?
Yeah, right.
You know, and I just didn't realize any of that because you grow up in this microcosmic kind of culture or whatever. And you know, actually, where I grew up, some of the mentors that I have as an artist are African American women. Pecolia Warner, Ethel Muhammad, you know, I just grew up with a kind of a different viewpoint of that. And then I got away and I went to the University of Delaware, where I was in D.C. and Boston and New York. I saw things that went like, man, you know. So, but you know, the thing about chronicling or finding out about your family history and videotaping that, that's one of the things I think that drew me to art and wanting to be an artist, because that is one of the best ways I know of to preserve our future, our past, and, you know, look into the future, you know, through imagination and stuff like that. So,
and as a speech-language pathologist, you know, I'm interested in what you're saying, because how would I take, how would you suggest I take art and apply it in a clinical situation? I mean, because, you know, we could have children draw things in terms of, you know, nonverbal children maybe draw out the things that they want to say, whatever else. But for that population, children with special needs, how can I help them to gain a better appreciation of art? Because, you know, if you have an exceptionality, sometimes people don't think that, you know, you should be exposed to things that typically developing children should be exposed to. So being that you're not in my field, how would you see me integrating art from all different eras into what I do? Or is there?
Well, that's a
need to.
That's a great question, but it's a very broad question.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that attracts a lot of people to art, or the study of art, is that it is a way of communicating that is nonverbal. And if you were, and this is just a guess on my part, but it would be a way to have a patient or a group of people or a study group open up and communicate things in ways that are not verbal, that are nonverbal. Line, you know, different kinds of lines invoke different kinds of emotional responses from the viewer. So one of the things that artists learn in my class, I teach three-dimensional design, and I love teaching visual language. Okay,
What is visual language?
Well, everything that is made, manufactured, painted, drawn, drawn, you know, this cup, this table, your tie, has the visual elements and principles of organization incorporated into it. In other words, color, texture, line, shape, mass, form, rhythm and repetition. So it's a purposeful manipulation of these things that cause you to walk into a clothier and say, I want that tie.
Okay.
You know? And a lot of people don't realize that.
Well, I have a cousin, in fact, who's working on a master's degree in packaging. You know, the packaging of products.
Exactly.
And what else? And I do know that packaging products in certain ways will allow them, you know, will encourage people to purchase them more than if they're packaged a different way.
Right.
And so I know that, you know, I know somewhat about that. But I mean, I guess, and in fact, I'm trying to gain a greater appreciation of art, because all of the things that you just mentioned are not things that I really would have thought of when I thought of art. You know, when I hear of art, I think of, you know, pictures that are complete, you know, on the wall. I don't think of, you know, all of the different things about mixing the, you know, the textures and the colors and the.
Right.
Is that something that if I'm not an artist, is that something that one acquires, or you just feel that people are somewhat born with?
Oh yeah, now you've hit on the top.
Yeah. I mean, because I mean, I've taken, you know, art class after art class, and I think I can still. I think the best I can do is probably a stick figure, and I mean, I've tried and tried and tried, and so I don't know if it's.
Well, let me just say, I tell my students you couldn't tie your shoes until you practiced. You couldn't ride a bike until you practiced. Now, there's a difference between drawing a figure and being an artist. I can teach anybody how to draw the figure and do it skillfully, but that doesn't make you an artist. To me, an artist, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
An artist
well, see, that's the question, because I'm wondering what makes an artist, because, I mean, I see things when I've gone to galleries and whatever else, and I look and I said, oh, that's art. Okay, so then I
could do that.
I could do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then someone looks at what I've done and say, no, that's not art. That's just scribble, or that's just paint just thrown on a, you know, on a canvas. Whereas someone else does the same thing, and they say, oh, that is just the greatest piece of art that I've seen since, you know.
Well, the best way I can explain that is this way, is through personal experience. I had a teacher, all the time growing up, I heard anybody that looked at a Jackson Pollock painting, you know, the guy that threw paint on the canvas, you know,
right.
They'd look at that and go, oh, a monkey could do that. Oh, a child could do that. Oh, an elephant could do that. And I went like, well, you know, maybe that's kind of true, you know, I don't know. But art for me was like, you know, Rembrandt, or, you know, something where it looked real, you know. And then I had a teacher one time that
something that looked like it took some skill to do.
Right. Yeah. I like that. It looks like it took some skill to do. Keep that thought, because we're going to get to that. He made me make 10 big plates about the size of this circle right here, and laid them out, and we had to work non-representationally. We could not draw any image on there that when people looked at it, they knew what it was, okay? Like, for instance, the pattern in your tie. If it weren't for that being a tie, no one, what is that? Well, it's blue, tan, beige squares, you know? Right. So, meaning that it is something other than a tie, right? So I laid these things out, and I watched him dip his glaze his brush in the glaze, and he started doing these decorations on these plates, and I went like, he said, now I want 20 of these in 2 weeks. I went like, piece of cake. You look, a monkey could do that, right? You know, and so I did my 20 plates and got them all out, and I started going like this, and I fired them, and I got them back, and I went like, my God, it looked like somebody loaded up their mouth with glaze and spit all over it, you know? And so what I learned from that experience is that an elephant or a dog or a monkey or a child can only do what they do. They cannot do what I do, okay? A, because they're not me, and B, it's not even a correct comparison. Okay?
But can I learn how to do what you do?
Yes, you can.
Or is art an acquired skill in addition to some natural, you know, talents that one has? I mean, is it a combination of those two things, or is it just more so?
Talent for me is I don't even use that word. It's extremely overrated. I love baseball. I can hit a baseball, but I am certainly not Barry Bonds.
Okay, right. You know, and else you wouldn't be here with me, right?
Man, we'd be someplace else right now. But my point is, and that's, you go like, oh yeah, no joke. Okay, we know you're not Barry Bonds. But my point is that I'm not so sure that getting to the point where Barry Bonds is solely about talent. I think I think there's some skill there. I think you got to have skill. You got to have ability. But I think what you got to have is you got to be able to swing a bat at a ball, you know, 100, 200 times a day.
Sure. For
how many games? And I think, man, you're going to get pretty good at that after a while, you know. Now, the people that go to the next level, that become the great ball player, artists, speakers, swimmers, dancers, to me are the people that transcend skill and talent. Now, I don't know that there's a formula for that.
But what makes art that sells, these pieces that sell for millions of dollars, and it looks just like what you described earlier, where someone just took some, their paint brushes and threw paint on a piece of canvas. What makes that work so significant, whereas when I do it, it's not significant to anybody? Is it because there's a certain name that's associated with it?
Like in Pollock's case, he did something that broke away from the norm. In other words, everybody was painting figuratively or landscapes. All of a sudden, he was the first artist to be interviewed on Life and make the cover of Life magazine. Okay. And when interviewed, they asked him, Jackson, what is your paintings about? He asked the same kind of question. Sure. And he looked at him and said, my paintings are about paint. And so for some reason, we have this need and desire in us as human beings to rationalize, why is this great? What is the formula for greatness?
Right.
And how does one get there? Okay. And my whole thing about that is that you do it so much that it's like playing guitar.
Sure.
I love blues musicians. B.B. King can get more out of one note than some of these speed metal guys get out of 150.
Sure. And
when you spend that amount of time and you live it day in and day out, I mean, you know more about that than anybody on the face of the earth.
Sure.
So to me, it's about passion. It's about the fundamentals have to be there: skill, knowledge, language. All those things. Right. And they don't have to be, I might add, it doesn't have to be in an academic environment. It could be in a rural environment, in a barn someplace, doing it, out back.
Sure. Sure.
But it has to be repeated over and over and over again with passion.
Yeah, because I've always enjoyed art. I love art of all types. I like African American art. I like art from the Impressionistic period. But I'm wondering, have you seen a change in art over the decades, especially with kids seeming to have a greater fascination now with video games and stuff like that versus taking a brush and whatever and doing or drawing. Yeah. I mean, what has that kind of technology done to what has that done to art?
It's changing it tremendously, and let me just add, not just art but language.
Well, yeah, and I agree. Creativity. I mean,
just the whole process of communicating.
Sure.
With someone. It's got to be fast. You got to give me the 1, 2, 3 FCAT steps. And don't ask me to make any decisions or think. Just tell me what I need to do. Get out of my way. Let me do it, and I'll make an A. Okay, and that's almost the exact opposite that I would want anybody that I love to know or to learn.
Right.
I'd want them to know those things, but it's very difficult right now because in my classes I try to slow them down and pull them back and say, well, do you understand the implications and responsibilities that go along with that mark that you just made? I mean, what kind of impact do you think it's going to have on your design, or you know, the way you communicate your idea to the viewer or something like that? What are the, you know, who are you culturally as a human being? How do you speak? How do you dress?
Sure.
Where are you from? How's that going to influence that line? And kids today don't want to know that. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like, so.
Yeah, because I was wondering, because I look at kids sometimes in my own neighborhood when I was a child, you know, big wheels. I don't even see a kid riding a big wheel anymore. Yeah. I mean, bicycles. I see some riding bicycles, you know, but the whole thing of big wheels and playing outside and hide and go seek and, you know, and games that we used to call red light, green light. I don't see kids doing that as much. Kick the can, or you played even, you know, played street ball and you use cans for the, you know, for your bases and stuff. I mean, I don't see that anymore, and or as much at least. And so I'm just wondering, what has that done in other areas like art? Because I know you know, the creativity that sometimes comes when kids interact with each other and they're outside doing things and, you know, and taking sticks and building this and building that. I think you said something real important there. It internalizes us as human beings. That's what I'm afraid of. Like, even those crazy games like kick the can or stick ball or whatever, that was an externalization. You know, we were physically manifesting things. We weren't like thinking about what we were going to do. We weren't going inside or inward or whatever. We were, you know, the inside was coming out to me. Yeah, well, yeah.